I think it's really important for those of you that are not in nursing to actually get a sense of the challenge for our nurses in New Zealand. And I get a privilege of talking to nurses up and down the country for the last year. And when they talk to me, I get a sense of how they're feeling. And I want to tell you how they are feeling, because they do feel the accumulated burnout of what is an incredibly heavy workload. They do feel immense frustration that they can't offer the time and the standard of care that they want to for their patients. They do feel that actually their work is now interfering and impacting on their home life. And they do feel less work engagement, less autonomy, and frankly less organisational support. And that's important because I think we ask a lot of our nurses, and actually being able to walk in their shoes and have a feeling for what it's like for them at this point is incredibly difficult. We all know there are shortages now of every health professional across the country, but nurses are at the front line of that collapsing healthcare system, and they're bearing the brunt of those staff shortages. New Zealand is now short 4,000 nurses and hundreds of midwives. And I think there's a lot to do in solving the health crisis that we have before us, and we're going to have a lot more to say about it, Shane and I, over the coming weeks and months. But I do think that the very first step, the logical first step, is to actually stop the decline of the health workforce. And that is incredibly vital because it's those that leave, it's putting tremendous pressure on those that remain in the system. And so that's why today I'm very pleased to announce practical steps for us to be able to attract, to train and to retain our two core professions in our healthcare system, namely our nurses and also our midwives. And there's two parts to it. The first is that we want to, under national government, we are going to make studying nursing and midwifery much more attractive. And I'm very pleased to tell you that if National wins the election, we're going to make midwives and nurses student loan repayments of up to $4,500 per year for the first 5 years of their careers. And in return, they will be bonded to work in their chosen profession in New Zealand for that 5-year period. And so what that means is that a typical nurse or midwife could increase their take-home pay by over $87 a week. And over 5 years, they would in fact be $22,500 better off. Further, to help that immediate crisis, that loan repayment and bonding scheme that we're introducing for new nurses will also be open to newly registered nurses and midwives in the workforce who are in their first 5 years of work. And we'll do that on a pro rata basis. So what that would mean is that we have a nurse in his or her second year on the job, they'll be able to sign up for the remaining 3 years of student loan repayments in return for 3 years of bonding to the system. Now, secondly, we also need to make sure that National is making New Zealand a much more attractive destination by allowing our qualified overseas nurses and midwives to be able to come here to New Zealand on a 6-month temporary visa with their immediate family members to actually look for work as a nurse or a midwife. And we're also going to establish a relocation support scheme, offering up to 1,000 qualified overseas nurses and midwives grants of up to $10,000 each to support them in moving to New Zealand. Now, the costing of all of those two components, bonding the homegrown trained nurses and also attracting qualified overseas nurses, will cost around $60 million a year. And it will be paid out of the remaining funds of us cancelling $400 million worth of consultants and contractors in Wellington. You might remember it was $400 million of cancellation, $250 million was sitting in our Family Boost childcare tax rebate, and the other balance of this will be used to be able to fund our bonding and investment scheme for nurses overseas and here at New Zealand. So I just want to say in closing, I am incredibly confident that this policy will make an important difference. It actually is going to make a difference to the New Zealanders whose surgeries are getting delayed because wards are actually closed because there is a shortage of nurses. It's going to make a difference to places like this here at Whitecross, where the nursing shortage is felt as keenly as anywhere else. And most importantly, it's going to make a difference to our nurses and midwives themselves, who I want them to know that National wants them and we value them. We're going to support them, making their careers here in New Zealand, not overseas. And so this is the latest policy, frankly, that a national government will adopt if elected in October. And I'm all about, as you know, about solving problems and getting things done and improving outcomes and results. And I think our policies are practical, they're workable, they're affordable, they're based on effective solutions to solving New Zealand's problems and ensuring that all New Zealanders can get ahead. Labor has overseen a crisis in the health workforce, and a government that I lead will fix it. and I will have a lot more to say about it before the election. But I want to say again, thank you to all of you for being here, and with that, happy to take any questions that you may have.
Why $4,500? Why not the whole thing?
Well, look, from our point of view, we've got nurses training for 3 years. It's roughly about $7,500 in student fees for each year that they're there. And we're saying we think that when you come out as a new graduate, if you make a commitment to bond your services to New Zealand for 5 years, we can actually reimburse you $22,500. And roughly that's about the cost of the course fees over that period of time.
How many nurses do you think the school's actually keeping in the country?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's 2,000 nurses that are actually graduating each year. There's about 150 midwives. Shane highlighted this week that there's actually been close to 4,500 nurses actually leaving the system this last year. So it's really important for us that we actually are able to offer all those new nurses that are coming through New Zealand's training system opportunities to be able to have their student loan paid for. I think it's important.
What further work would you do for the other nurses that have been in the industries for a while that are also frustrated as well?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, there are so many issues and there are so many frustrations. I think what I'm asking is that we have to be really dispassionate to say this health crisis that we are in has got a whole range of aspects to it. But the first logical, most important first step that we can take today, and we'll have a lot more to say, Shane and I, over the coming weeks and months, but is to say we have to start to put in place a pipeline of training nurses here at home, but also making New Zealand a much more attractive destination for qualified nurses from overseas. And the thing I want I need people to understand is essentially for every nurse that we have been training in New Zealand, every one that comes into the system, at least one goes out of the system. And so that churn is just not sustainable, and that's why we actually have to put a marker in the line. And when we see other countries aggressively targeting our health workforce, and they'll continue to do so, the risk is that things will get worse, not better, over the next few years. So starting and doing something like this is a really important signal to send.
And we've also spoken about 19,000 nurses leaving over the last few years. Is there not an element of misinformation in that, given I understand that some of those nurses may have just moved from district to district?
I'll let Shane talk to that.
Thank you. We've made that caveat very clear, that of the 19,000 there are some who may have transferred and some who have been re-employed, so it was a figure that was re-employed, so we've been very clear with that. What we're also clear about is that last year 4,310 nurses did not renew their annual practicing certificates. So that is a very clear data point from the Minister. So yes, 19,000, some of them could have been re-employed. The 5,000 who have registered in Australia since August, they haven't actually turned up there, they've just registered. So those caveats are important on the way, but what is not ambiguous is the 4,300 who did not renew their annual practicing certificates last year.
How many of those may have been of retirement age?
Of retirement, don't know, but we have asked those figures. It seems that maybe less than 1,000, maybe those who are retiring per year, about 800, 850 variably year to year, but it would seem like from the answers we get back, maybe 1,000 are retiring rather than exiting offshore.
Do you think pay is the key issue? Why would you want to come or stay here if you could earn double in Australia?
I think there's several points here. There's terms and conditions and there's wages and salary. And we understand the wages and salary terms and conditions, particularly for retention, for other parts, which is what you talked about, other parts of the pipeline. Very important to look at things like job satisfaction and nursing as a lifelong career and burnout. And these are the other parts that we'll talk to and that we'll discuss and have some solutions for. So you're right, it's vital. We're focusing on the beginning part of the pipeline here today with the offer of student loan relief.
The state of the healthcare system has been described as perilous. Why would new nurses want to be locked in for 5 years in that?
Because they've already completed their training and they already have sort of made a commitment to nursing anyway. What we do know is in the first 5 years postgraduate, which is where our offering is, there are hundreds of New Zealand trained nurses, generally about year 3 or year 4, who actually leave. They don't renew their annual practicing certificate. We particularly want this policy to be attractive to them to see out the 5 years with us. They've made an investment in themselves. We want to make an investment in them also.
Is there a cap as to how many can take advantage of this study under relocation scheme?
For the student loan relief, no, not at this point. We've modelled it on the 2,000 who come out each year. For the relocation scheme, 1,000, yeah.
How are you going to police the scheme? Because if somebody comes to the country and then doesn't sign up to be a nurse, what's going to happen? How are you going to keep track on it?
So it's not the observation from some of the Australian territories who have done this. What we find is that if you make it easy for people to come on shore, maybe make it easy for myself as well. If you make it easy for people to come on shore, let them bring their families with them. Why would you separate families? Make it easy for them, give them relocation opportunities. They've got a skill set, they want to apply it, we want to help them do that.
And frankly, we're in a place, I think, with the crisis that we have, that we actually need to step up and actually make sure that we do whatever it takes to get it going now. We can debate it, we can discuss it, but we actually need to get people here, and we need to open up our settings big time. Okay, are there any other questions, team? Well, again, can I just say thank you so much for coming out here on a windy Sunday. I really appreciate it. Can I say thank you again to the team at White Cross for the great work that you do. And I hope that this is, people will respect that this is the first step of many policies that we'll have to talk about how we address our healthcare system. But I think it's an encouraging one to be able to attract, train and retain great nurses here in New Zealand, while also reaching out and attracting those overseas and make this a competitive and compelling place for them to be. Again, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the latest news from the New Zealand Herald. Click the subscribe button below or check out one of the videos here, and head over to nzherald.co.nz for more details on these stories and more.